So guys, you won't believe it. You won't believe it. Manny Pacquiao is now rumored for potentially a fight with Errol Spence in July in America. I want to talk about this because this is kind of hilarious in a way, because firstly, it shows how great Manny Pacquiao is. It shows the fact that he was involved in negotiations with Terence Crawford, which fell through, and now he's gone straight to negotiating with Errol Spence. It shows what Manny Pacquiao's where Manny Pacquiao's mindset's at. It shows the fact that Manny Pacquiao wants to dare to be great, even at his age. He wants to do something iconic. Even at his age, he wants to be the best, which is incredible. And you've got to take your hat off to him, because if this is true, and Michael Benson's reported this as well, just like I did my other video saying Michael Benson said that Terence Crawford's off, Pacquiao Crawford is off, Michael Benson's also reported this. So Michael Benson generally gets most things right? So the chances are there's a very good chance that there are negotiations going on between Pacquiao and Spence. It shows the fact that Manny Pacquiao just wants to fight the best in the division. He wants to prove still at 42 that he can beat these young lions. And you've got to respect that. And actually, it's an example to a lot of these young fighters today who, like, for example, we've seen in the lightweight division, Ryan Garcia not fighting Devin Haney. It's showing these young guys the way that, look, Manny Pacquiao's 42 years of age and he's still not ducking and dodging. He still wants to fight the best. He's still negotiating to try to get in the ring with the best. And a lot of these guys are trying to pad up their records and, look for that big payday. Whereas Pacquiao still, at 42 years of age, still wants to add to his greatness. Even though Manny Pacquiao is one of the greatest fighters of all time, right? He doesn't need to add. He could retire and he'd still be one of the greatest fighters of all time. But yet he still has that hunger because he's an old school fighter. Manny Pacquiao is from the old school. He's not from today. He's not cut from the same cloth as today's fighters. He's from the old school. He's from the old school. He wants to prove he's the best. And you got to respect that, man. You got to respect that. At his age, man, to be wanting to fight Errol Spence and Terence Crawford is ridiculous. Because most fighters, at 42, they'll start picking and choosing. He wants to fight the best. He still wants to fight the best. Now, obviously, these fights haven't materialized. We know the Crawford fights fell through. But the fact that he was in negotiations with him shows that he wants those fights. The fact that now he's got into negotiation with Errol Spence, maybe he saw the backlash, or the fact that there wasn't that much interest in the Mikey Garcia fight. So he thought, you know what, there's no interest there. Let me jump into an even bigger fight where I'll get more credit from a legacy standpoint. He'll get a lot more credit beating Crawford or Spence, right? And it'll probably be more money, possibly. I'm not sure about Crawford, but Spence will possibly be more money. I think Mikey will might be more money than Spence, especially in the I don't know. Maybe in the US it definitely be a bit more money, because I think Mikey's probably a little bit more well known than Terence Crawford. But we know that fight was going to be taking place in UAE, where there was an investor that was going to put up the money. So obviously that would have probably in my opinion, the purse would have been a lot more for the Crawford fight, just because of the fact that I think it would have been an investor putting the money up, paying the fighters both handsomely. Whereas I think in the US, I think Mikey Garcia and Pacquiao will be a bigger fight than Crawford Pacquiao. So, but however, in the US, I think Spence Pacquiao is bigger than anything out of those three fights. I think Spence is definitely a bigger name now. He's growing. His profile is growing. His marketability is going up, and I think that would be a big fight. And I think it's a more dangerous fight for Pacquiao because Spence is a lot bigger, stronger, and I do worry for him in that fight, especially late on. Later on in the rounds, I think someone like Spence could wear Manny Pacquiao down. Although I do think that Crawford would have been a much more difficult fight, because Crawford's fast on his feet, he's fast of hands, and at this age, could Manny Pacquiao deal with somebody who's very, very sharp? However, I think with Spence, I think Manny Pacquiao could outbox Spence, because Manny Pacquiao has the faster feet, faster hands. It's just the fact that Errol Spence's relentless pressure might be a problem for Manny Pacquiao, especially in the later rounds we saw against Thurman. And Thurman's not as physically as imposing as Errol Spence. Errol Spence is a lot more physically imposing than someone like Keith Thurman. So he could definitely wear. And we saw Keith Thurman in that fight wore Pacquiao down towards the end of that fight. I think Spence is a lot more physically imposing, and that might be a problem for Pacquiao. But you got to respect him trying to take that challenge. You got to respect him trying to take that leap. And that's what Manny Pacquiao's done. That's why I love Manny Pacquiao. That's why I think he's one of the greatest of all time. He takes all fights. He's lost a couple fights. He's been knocked out, but that doesn't mean anything. That's why when people say, oh, he's been knocked out a couple of times, it don't mean anything to me. When you fight the best time and time again, you get knocked out. Many fighters will get knocked out. Manny Pacquiao's moved up 8 weight classes. He's fought guys way bigger than him, stronger than him. You know, of course, there's going to be times where he will lose or get knocked out or get hurt because he's fighting guys way bigger. He's fighting guys double the size. Of course he could get knocked out. And it's crazy the fact that when he did get knocked out, it wasn't against the bigger guys. It was against Marquez, who was probably his size. You know, which is fun. And yeah, I know we got knocked out early on in his career as well, but that was really early on in his career. Before Manny Pacquiao was even known to a lot of the US public. So yeah, I like the fight. I like the fact that Manny Pacquiao's wanting to fight the best. Errol Spence is a unified champion. Manny Pacquiao can gain a lot by beating him. So yeah, I would have loved the thought of Errol Spence fighting Ugas and then fighting Crawford and the winner fighting Pacquiao. But I just think Pacquiao hasn't got that time, and a lot of these guys. And to be honest with you, there's no way Pacquiao can wait that long, because it doesn't look like Spence and Crawford is going to happen anytime soon. So Manny Pacquiao hasn't got time to wait. You know, he wants to jump into a big legacy fight, big money fight, and see how he gets on with the likes of Crawford and Spence. And rather than waiting for them guys to clean up, and that he'll be waiting forever, and he's not got the time on his side. You know, he's not 32, he's 42. So for me, he just wants to get a big fight in. He wants to fight one of the big guys. Look, he fought Adrian Broner and Keith Thurman in 2019. He's at the real, in my opinion, right at the final stage of his career now, Pacquiao. He's got max 1 or 2 fights. I think maximum 2 fights, minimum at least a fight. I can't see him just calling it a day. Who knows? If these Errol Spence fight negotiation talks fall through, he may just call it a day, you know? Who knows? I don't think so. I still think he's got a bit of fight left in him, and I think he still wants to fight. So I don't think he's going to call it a day, so to speak. But who knows what he decides to do. I hope he gives us one more fight. Now, I don't care who is it against. Now, if it's Errol Spence, then you just got to applaud Manny Pacquiao for continuing to fight the best. Like, yeah, who's doing that at 42 years of age? And, look, he was 40 years of age, and he fought Thurman and Broner. That's nothing to be sniffed at. That's unbelievable, right? If he fights Errol Spence, wow, that's just crazy. And this is a fight where, against Pacquiao Thurman, it was seen as 50-50. Some people were edging towards Thurman, but it was kind of like 50-50. Broner, he was a huge favorite. This fight, this would be like 90-10. I think most people would think Errol Spence knocks Manny Pacquiao out. Most people in the boxing world, apart from obviously Manny Pacquiao fans, will think he wins, but most people would be favoring Manny Pacquiao will be a huge underdog in this fight. And I can't remember the last time Manny Pacquiao was a huge underdog in any fight. Maybe even the Floyd Mayweather fight, he was an underdog in that fight. People saw that as a 50-50, right? Or Floyd a slight favorite. But this one, he'd be a huge underdog in. Not because Errol Spence is better than him, or not, because where he's at in his career. Because in his prime, Manny Pacquiao would have been hugely favored by most people to beat Errol Spence. But it's just the fact that he's almost 42, nearly 43 years of age. And he hasn't fought for almost 2 years. And by the time he fights Errol Spence, which is rumored for July, he would have been almost 2 years out the ring. And at 42, 43 years of age, that's too long for a guy of that age to be out the ring. And then you're not just fighting any old fighter. You're fighting the best in the division. You're fighting a guy that's way bigger than you, very strong, a good boxer. You know, that's going to be a tough fight. That's going to be a tough fight for Manny Pacquiao, without question. And I think the victory, if he was to manage to pull something like that off, would probably go down as one of the greatest victories of all time. And what I mean by that is, at that age, for somebody like, I know George Foreman did what he did against Michael Moore when he came back, but this would be way bigger, because Errol Spence is seen as one of the best pound for pound fighters in the world. Manny Pacquiao is 42 and Errol Spence is undefeated. Errol Spence is unified champion, and Errol Spence looks really good right now. So if Manny Pacquiao was to pull this off, I think that would go down as one of a historic win. A historic win. And I actually think it would be the best win of Manny Pacquiao's career. I actually think it would be, because of the stage of where he's at. Maybe not Manny Pacquiao's beat some great fighters, but at the stage where he's at in his career, right, you'd have to say that'd probably be his greatest win of his career, because of where he's at and how good Errol Spence is right now, and where Manny Pacquiao's at in the stage of his career. I think you'd have to say it's probably his best win. So Manny Pacquiao, for me, is daring to be great. And if this fight comes off, I'll obviously be tuning in. I'll obviously be doing a lot of videos about it, because, like I said, I think the best should fight the best. And Manny Pacquiao would be showing the way at 42 years of age to a lot of the fighters in world boxing, that the best should fight the best. And I actually think this fight, in terms of a profile point of view, is a much bigger fight. I think this is I think Errol Spence is a lot bigger than Terence Crawford in terms of profile, especially in the US. He's a bigger name, bigger star, and for me, that would be a much bigger fight for Pacquiao. I think financially it'd be bigger as well, especially if it happens in the US, because Pacquiao Crawford in the US, it'd be big, but not that big. I think Pacquiao Spence is a lot bigger than Pacquiao Crawford in the US. I think obviously if there was an investor from the Middle East that was willing to put the money up, then maybe Pacquiao would have got a lot of money. It's going to be interesting to see how much he's offered against Errol Spence, even in the US, because unless they think that it's going to be a huge payday, because we do know that Manny Pacquiao asked for 40 million. I don't know if this is true. Manny Pacquiao asked for 40 million to fight Crawford. Is he going to ask for the same money against Spence? Is that really realistic? Are they going to be willing to put up that kind of money? Are they going to be able to recoup that? Because that's a lot of money you'd have to do, a lot of pay-per-views that you'd have to sell to pay Manny Pacquiao that kind of money. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see whether this fight comes off. What do you guys think? Do you think Manny Pacquiao and Errol Spence will come off? I have my doubts still until Manny Pacquiao signs the contract and the fight's officially announced. But I do think there's more chance of this one, because I'm more confident with this one, right, than the Crawford one, because I think it wasn't just the fact with the money being put up by an investor and stuff. It was the fact that Bob Arum, what's Manny Pacquiao's relationship like with him? Terence Crawford just seems to never secure one of those big fights, whereas Spence has fought some big welterweights or big names. I won't say Crawford's fought some big names. He's fought Khan Brook, some big names, but they were past their best. I mean, like, big names more fresh and in their prime still. And not to say Pacquiao's not in his prime, nowhere near, but he's still seen as a credible welterweight and seen as one of the best welterweights. Like, he's ranked number 3 in the welterweight division. So, yeah, he's still seen as a credible welterweight. But imagine if Errol Spence does get this fight with Manny Pacquiao. Imagine how Terence Crawford must feel if this fight was to happen between Pacquiao and Spence. Crawford would feel gutted, because we all know that Crawford really wanted the Manny Pacquiao fight bad. He really wanted the Manny Pacquiao fight bad. So if Spence was to get that fight, right, Crawford would feel gutted. And not just that, Errol Spence's resume starts looking thick. Like, I'm talking thick. His resume starts to look really, really good, right? And when he comes to the table against Terence Crawford, you better believe it, he's going to be asking for 70-30. He's going to be asking for big money, because if Spence was to beat Pacquiao, his profile increases even further. He becomes an even bigger star, right? And then he'll probably fight Ugas, right? And get the third belt, and then he'll be a much bigger star and the unified champion, right? Crawford will have no leg to stand on. And I don't think that fight happens. I don't think that fight happens because I don't think Terence Crawford will be willing to take anything but a 50-50 split. He won't take the fight. So I actually thought that the Crawford-Pacquiao fight would make, if Crawford was to win, of course, which is no gimme, and not to say that Spence is going to beat Pacquiao because that's no gimme, but they would be both favorites against Pacquiao. I thought if Pacquiao-Crawford happened, the chances of Spence-Crawford happening a lot higher because Crawford's profile would increase massively. And then I think they probably could come to an agreement in terms of split. But now, Spence's popularity and Spence's name is already bigger than Crawford. If he was to fight Pacquiao, it's only going to grow. He's only going to grow, right? He would then his resume would be a lot thicker, right? The chances are that after his next fight, after Pacquiao, would be someone like Ugas or whoever's holding that belt. And if he wins that fight, then he's a 3-belt holder, a bigger name, a bigger star with a better resume, right? Terence Crawford isn't going to have a leg to stand on. At that point, Spence would be such a bigger star compared to Crawford that if you're Spence and his team, there's no way you're going to be looking for 50-50. And Crawford's not going to accept anything but 50-50. So then you come to a position where that fight is not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And that would be a shame. But that's how I see it going. I think if Spence-Pacquiao does happen and Spence was to win, I do think that we probably go further away from the Crawford Spence fight. I think the only way that fight would happen if Spence really wants to become undisputed welterweight champion and he says, you know what, I've made a lot of money, I'll sacrifice a little bit of what I think I'm worth just to become undisputed champion. I think that's the only way the fight happens between Spence and Crawford. I think Spence would have to probably, swallow a bit of his ego, swallow a bit of his pride, which he may do. Becoming undisputed may be a big thing for Errol Spence. Who knows? I think Errol Spence is cut from that cloth. I do think he wants to become undisputed because he's always mentioned it. Crawford's already become undisputed at a lower weight class. So let's see if what Spence does. But I do like this fight between Spence and Pacquiao. If it does happen, I like it. Will it happen? I think it's probably more likely than Crawford-Pacquiao because it just seems like that fight was always talked about and never come to fruition, whereas I think hopefully this one can come to fruition. Leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you think this fight will happen? Manny Pacquiao v Errol Spence. Leave your thoughts. And guys, remember to please like, share, subscribe to my channel. I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.